No change in Ukraine. Nearly 150 combat clashes took place between Russia and Ukraine last night. Putin's troops attacked Ukrainian civilians. Kiev responded with a drone assault on enemy soil, targeting a refinery in Krasnodar Krai. For now, there is no talk of a ceasefire here. We are trying to surprise the enemy with artillery attacks. The situation on the front has not changed. We are trying to move forward meter by meter. In diplomacy, it looks similar. The U.S. negotiators first took a step forward, convincing Ukraine of a ceasefire. And yesterday, they had to back off again.
Thank you.
Donald Trump's envoy to Russia, Steve Witkoff, passed Washington's proposal to Moscow, a ceasefire on a trial basis for 30 days and peace talks with Ukraine. The Kremlin initially rejected the offer. Will the Ukrainians devote these 30 days to mobilize their army, replenish their weapons, and train their soldiers? Moscow has decided that the U.S.-Ukrainian agreement, negotiated in Saudi Jeddah, is too favorable to Kiev. But Donald Trump thinks Putin will come to his senses.
We know where we are with Ukraine, and we are getting good signals outside of Russia as to where we are with Russia. And hopefully they'll do the right thing. It's really humanity. We're talking about humanity. We're not talking about the money. But then you add the money to it, and, hundreds of billions of dollars is being spent and really wasted.
Cautiously optimistic.
For now, we have a stalemate. While it was to be expected that the Kremlin would not immediately accept the Americans' offer, negotiations are ongoing. Certainly, the Russians want more, and Putin will want to escalate, primarily because if the Russians feel that the Americans care very much about this, they are willing to exert even more pressure in order to get better terms. The question now is, what should Donald Trump do to get Vladimir Putin to sit down at the negotiating table? There are a lot of possibilities. This is already such hard power. You can act by proxy in Ukraine. That is, strengthen and give more lethal weapons. The Ukrainians will use it in the direct field without hesitation, when this will actually be felt by Putin. And there are also these soft actions, like putting pressure with sanctions. Putin certainly understands the language of force, and on the front, the Americans are again providing the Ukrainians with their weapons and intelligence. This is a priceless advantage. The Ukrainian General Staff estimates that criminal Russia has lost nearly 900,000 soldiers since the war began, but the Ukrainian army is also suffering losses and looks to be withdrawing from the Kursk region. Kiev is clearly declaring that in line with Donald Trump's vision, it wants peace. The question is whether Moscow wants the same. The Russians are already being manipulative about the ceasefire. Putin is preparing to reject it. He is obviously afraid to tell President Trump directly that Moscow wants to continue this war and kill Ukrainians. Everything is based on interests. The Russians don't care what we want. It's hard to say how this will develop. Today, it is absolutely impossible to believe Putin. We can't talk about an agreement when missiles are constantly flying. Saudi Arabia's heir to the throne spoke with Putin today. Perhaps a mediator will again be needed in Washington's negotiations with Moscow, as was the case with Kiev. Donald Trump's goal is a lasting and guaranteed peace in Ukraine, which will protect defenseless civilians. I believe that peace will come to Ukraine. I love Kharkiv very much, and I have not left the city since the first day of the war. A ceasefire would be a good solution. Then people would stop dying. It would be something positive. But countries that have experienced Russian aggression know well that Russia cannot be trusted. Hence, in Kiev, people are holding their ground. President Andrzej Duda's interview with the Financial Times is being commented on around the world. The Polish president has once again raised questions about the transfer of nuclear weapons to Poland under the nuclear sharing program. This proposal was repeated by Andrzej Duda in a recent interview with the BBC. This is the same Russia that is attacking Ukraine today, that is the aggressor, that is murdering civilians, that is bombing civilian settlements, and it is moving its nuclear weapons from deep inside Russia to Belarus. This defensive tactic is a key response to Russia's behavior, moving nuclear weapons into NATO territory. Poland is ready to accept these nuclear weapons. Any strategic infrastructure, US and NATO, that we have on our territory strengthens the willingness of the US and the North Atlantic Alliance to defend that territory. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on Fox News spoke skeptically about installing nuclear weapons in our country.
So I haven't talked to the president about that particular issue, but I would be shocked if he was supportive of nuclear weapons extending further east into Europe. We have got to be careful.
The president's office stresses that it's not about additional nuclear weapons in Europe, just a transfer from one place to another. This is an important political signal to be able to consider Poland in terms of not on the basis of expansion, but transfer, for example, of these weapons, because it is perhaps the case that not everyone wants to have these weapons in their country. You can see that, for example, with Germany, which doesn't really want to have it and is pushing the United States away. So we say, since Germany is pushing Americans out, we are ready to do it in Poland. So let's let the idea grow here. Security experts emphasize that even if there will be no nuclear weapons in Poland, President Duda's actions could contribute to our country's security. Of course, I consider the proposal unlikely, while it is a very good negotiating leverage, because in such negotiations you can always say, if not nuclear sharing, then increase the contingent of soldiers, and then the conversation begins. Poland is, however, the leader of the region and a large Eastern European country, of course. It is not a superpower, but we also have our security arguments, which we should use in such negotiations. These arguments are recognized by U.S. President Donald Trump, who during yesterday's conversation with the NATO Secretary General once again mentioned Poland as a good example of a country that invests in its military and in its security.
Remember, Poland was actually paying a little bit more than they were supposed to, which was...
This is thanks to, among others, Polish President Andrzej Duda, during whose term we purchased F-35 fighter jets, Abrams tanks, or HIMARS launchers from the Americans. The Polish president's actions to strengthen our country's security are, of course, criticized by representatives of the ruling coalition. This is an absolute diplomatic disaster for the president. It is worth negotiating first and communicating later. But to communicate such information in an interview? Shock. U.S. Vice President ridicules President Duda's nuclear proposal hours after it was made. Shame on the authority of the head of state in Poland, especially on such a serious issue. Let's recall when the Polish president said that it is necessary to increase the amount of money for NATO and said it is supposed to be at 3% of GDP. The opposition to the ruling government at the time also said something similar. But it was, after all, the president who started this conversation about increasing NATO spending, even though the opposition questioned who is going to do it, and now everyone is talking about it. Currently, Poland already contributes 5% of GDP towards defense, so there are some politicians who are ahead of some strategic thinking by discussing the security of our country. Thus, thinking about and increasing our security can hardly be called a shameful act. What the president has done is the beginning of a certain process that will eventually lead to us, Poles, feeling more safe. So the civic platform, please don't go down that road, because there should be only one path when it comes to Poland's security. Yesterday, the German station RBB confirmed that the center in Eisenhüttenstadt is in full swing. The immigrants in the center, who will be sent back to Poland under the Dublin procedures, are, however, only a fraction of the number of foreigners being transferred to Poland. Polish services do not control the pushbacks implemented by the Germans, which are called by them Zurückweisungen. According to numerous communications from our Western neighbors, the Germans have been successful in making pushbacks, something they are happy to brag about. This is an entry by Olaf Scholz. Border controls have been effective in reducing illegal migration, as the following data shows: 47,000 border rejections, 1/3 fewer asylum applications between 2023 and 2024, and the arrest of 1,900 human traffickers. And here's the Bundestag's information on the number of migrants sent back to Poland under administrative procedures, or Zurückweisungen. We forwarded this data to Minister Duszczyk with a request for a reference. However, border. The ministry has been silent for several weeks.
Ja muszę powiedzieć, że nie znam tych danych.
I have to say that I don't know this German data. Perhaps if you give me this data or anyone else. Karol Nawrocki, a citizens candidate for the Polish presidency, spoke today in Gubin about the information chaos regarding the number of illegal immigrants sent back to Poland from Germany. We're not able to find out today how many illegal immigrants are actually on the territory of Poland. We don't have such information, even from the border towns of Poland. It is from the German press that we are finding out that Germany relocated 40,000 migrants from Germany in 2023. In contrast to the Austrian government, the Polish Ministry of Interior and Administration is silent on the subject of German pushback procedures. It seems that this topic is deliberately omitted by Ministers Siemoniak and Duszczyk. The government is following a policy of half-truths and blurring the facts. It is purposely mixing Dublin procedures with the Migration Pact, which will be implemented in Poland in 2026. It is completely silent on the subject of pushbacks. Pushbacks are already taking place at the Polish-German border. We are accepting illegal immigrants from Germany whose criminal histories are not being investigated. By not introducing controls on our side of the border, Polish services are making it much easier for German authorities to smuggle foreigners into Poland. The Germans are trying to divide their increased immigration problem, and unfortunately they are taking advantage of the weakness of the Polish government, the lack of reaction, and are pushing more and more illegal immigrants from the western side into Poland, especially in a situation where there is no political reaction from the Polish government and no border controls of any kind on the Polish side. Both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration are silent on the subject of pushbacks, instead eagerly referring to Donald Tusk's statements, assuring Poles that Poland will not implement the Migration Pact, contrary to the opinions of experts and representatives of the European Commission. I addressed a direct question to the European Commission about the disclosure of the document that supposedly exempts us from this obligation. Well, and not surprisingly, the European Commission did not answer the question because there is no such document. Simply put, Donald Tusk is deceiving the citizens. Poland will be obliged to accept tens of thousands of immigrants or pay more than 20,000 euros for each one. The lack of information from the ruling coalition may be related to the ongoing election campaign in Poland. Today, we once again asked the Interior and Administration Ministry for information on whether and how Polish services control the repatriation of foreigners from the border strip on the German side. And once again, Minister Maciej Duszczyk did not provide any information.